back to the quantity surveying workshop and to another video. In today's video, we're going to be treating how to measure the blockwork inside the foundation for a framed structure. Now, first things first, what is the unit of measurement for blockwork? The unit of measurement for blockwork is in what? Square meters, meaning that we need to find the total length of the blockwork inside the foundation, and we need to find the height of the blockwork inside the what? Foundation. When we derive those things, we are going to be getting the total square meters of what? The blockwork inside the what? Foundation. Secondly, unlike in simple straight structures where the blockwork are what? Joined together, in this case, in a frame structure, the blockwork are not necessarily what? Joined together, only in few cases where the blockwork are joined together. Meaning, in the frame structure, the blockwork is spanned from one column to another what? Column, like you can see in this what? Drawing. As you can see, this line, this box you are seeing here is what? The blockwork. And you can see that it's starting from what? The end of this thick dot, which is a column, to the other end or to the other side of what? A column. So the blockwork spans from one column to another what? Column. Only in rare cases where there's an intersection between two blockworks, like in this point here. See, there's the blockwork coming like this, and there's another blockwork intersecting it. So those are the cases you have to what? Have in mind when you are measuring for what? Your blockwork for what? A frame structure. So now the first thing we're going to be doing is to determine the total length of what? The blockwork inside the what? Foundation. But before we do that, you have to go to your floor plan and then check the kind of block that were used to what? Create the blockwork in the foundation, whether they are 225 or 150 blockwork used inside the what? Foundation. But in this case, all the blockwork used in this drawing were what? All 225 blockwork. So with that, we can now begin measuring for what? The length of what? All the blockwork inside this what? Foundation. So to get the length, the total length of the what? Blockwork, we have to determine the individual length of the what? Blockwork in the what? Foundation, from what? One point to another what? Point. So now this is what we're going to be adopting. Since the type of dimension given here is center to center dimension, so we need to determine the length of the blockwork from the edge of what? The column, that's from this edge down to the other what? Edge. I don't know if that makes sense. So let me just use this marker to kind of highlight this. So we're going to be starting from if this is the blockwork we want to start with, so we need to determine the length from the edge of this was column down to this point here. So the place I highlighted green is our what? Blockwork. So we need to determine what is the length of that what? Blockwork. Now, another thing you need to have in mind is that sometimes you have to use your geometry into account when doing blockwork to make your work faster, using parallel and perpendicular lines and stuff like that. If you notice, this green line that I just did here, whatever we determine our length to be, it is going to be what? The same length as what? This blockwork from here, from this edge of this intersecting block. You know that this blockwork is coming like this, and there's another one intersecting. So just at the point of intersection to the point of intersection of this part here, the length of this blockwork is going to be the same as this one. And similarly is the case for this blockwork here. As you can see, the line is the same as what we have there, and similarly this one too. So as you can see, it is the same length, and similarly this one under, they are the same what length, because they are parallel to each other, and as you can see, they are within call out A and what C. So this is call out A here, this is call out A, this is call out C. This block work is what between call out A and C, and the 1 2 3 4 5, the 5 block work that we've highlighted is what in between call out A and C, meaning that whatever we get for the first one is the same thing we're going to get for this one, this one, this one, and this one. So if you had this knowledge, it is going to make your work faster, because if you don't know this, you are going to be measuring this one separate, and that's going to take a lot of time. But because of I have this piece of information in my locker, I can just determine the length of one and then multiply it by the number of what block work that the block is going to be of the same what length. I don't know if that makes sense, but when we begin our measurement now, you are going to understand it better. So how do we determine the length of what the block work? As you can see, between call out A and C, there is a dimension of what 4008, and if you look at call out A, it is at the midpoint of what a column type what 2. Similarly, at what call out C, it is moving through the midpoint of what a column type what 2. So what do we now want to determine? We want to determine the length of this block from the edge of this column down to the edge of the other what column. So what can we do? What we can do is this: we have to determine what is the length of the column type. Once we determine what the length of the column type is, we will now divide it by 2, because this line is what in the midpoint. That's call out A is in the midpoint of the word column. So in our drawing from our previous videos, the length and width of column type 2 is what 230 by what 230. So what we can now do now is what, since the length is 230 and call out A is passing through the midpoint, we can now divide 230 by what 2. So half will be for this side, half will be for this side. So what we can now do is this: since this line is at the edge of 2 column type 2, we can now minus what half of column type 2 from both sides. So mathematically, this is what we mean. Since the center to center dimension is 4008, we minus half of column type 2 from this side and half of column type 2 from this side. So whatever we have is the length of the block work from the edge of column type 2 here to the other edge of column type 2. So after we now determine what the length is, you know that what we have here is the same thing as what we have in this block work. It's the same length as what we're going to be having in this block work, and it's the same length as what we're going to be having in this block work, and it's the same length as what we're going to be having in this block work. So that particular length of block work, you will multiply it by what 1 2 3 4 5. Whatever you have is the total length of these 5 block work that are what parallel to each other. I just hope that makes sense. So now we're going to be doing what the maths. So the dimension is what 4008. There will now less what 2 by what half of what the column, which is what 230. So 2, which is for the 2 columns in between what call out A and C, that's in between the dimension, times half, which is by half of each of the word column, times what the length of the word column, which is what 230. So it's like saying half of 230 times 2. So it's going to give us what 230. That if you take half of 230 from one side and half of 230 from the other side, if you add it together, it's going to give you what 230. So when you do the math, 4008 minus 230 is going to give me 3778. And how many number of this length of block work were parallel? There were what? 5 in number. So we will now multiply it by what? 5. That will give us 18,890. So doing this, we've measured for what? All the 5 parallel block works on that what line or in between columns A and what C. So we've measured for what? These green ones that I've highlighted, 1, 2, 3, 4, and what? 5. I hope that makes sense. So similarly, we're going to be doing the same approach to what? All the what? Horizontal block work first before we go to the what? Vertical block work. So the next block work we're going to be looking at is the block work in between call out what? C. In between call out C and this midpoint here. So as you can see, we have 2 dimensions. We need to know the total dimension from this point down to what? This point. So between color C and D, we have 3,943. And in between color D and this dimension here, we have 637. So we need to add the 2 dimensions together to give us what? The total dimension from color C down to what? This point. So when we add 3,943 with 637, we're going to be having what? 4,580, meaning that the dimension from here to here is what? 4,580. Now the same way we measured for the length of the first block work is the same way we're going to be measuring for what? This point, this block work here. So now you know that in between call out C and this point, the line is passing in between a column on both sides. Column type 2 here and another column type 2 here. And we know that the length of column type 2 or the dimension of column type 2 is what? 230 by what? 230 from our drawing. So we will now use the same approach. Since we've gotten the length of this dimension from column C down to this point, we will now minus half of what? The length of column type 2 from this side and half of the length of column type 2 from this side. Whatever we have will be the length of this block work from this point to this point. So if I use my marker, this is the block work we are from this edge down to this edge here. And now if you notice here, another block work is parallel to this one, which is what? This block work, because this block work is parallel to what? The dimension, the call outs from call out C down to this what? Other point here. Because if I trace the line, you can see call out C is moving down to this point here, parallel. They are parallel. And if I trace the dimension line from this point, it is the same thing. So it means that whatever length we have here will be the same length we have at this side. So I'm just going to highlight it. So whatever length we get, we'll be multiplying it by what? 2. To cater for what? The one up and the one down. I hope that makes sense. So with that, now we're now going to be doing our what? Calculation. So the second one, now we know that the length, the dimension from call out C down to that point, as we calculated, was what? 4,580. So now let's what? 2 by half of what? 230. I explained what I mean by this. Let me come again. The 2 is for the 2 columns that we have in between the what? The sides of the what? Block work. You know there's a column at one edge and there's another column at the other edge, making it what? 2. That's what this 2 represents. Now this half represents the call out is passing through the midpoint of what? The column. Meaning that for us to get the total length of our block work, we have to minus half of what? The column from the 2 columns that we have on each side. That is what this half represents. And then this 230 represents the length of what? The column. So 2 times half of 230 is going to give us what? 230, because 2 times half is what? 1. 1 times 230 is what? 230. So it means the half of the column at the other edge will be what? 115. And half of the what? Length of the column on the other edge will be what? 115. If you add it together, you're going to be having what? 230. So it's the same process, but this is just faster. So we'll now be having what? 230. So when we do the math, 4,580 minus 230 is going to give me what? 4,350. So 4,350 is the length of what? One of the blockwork. And I said that the blockwork is what? Parallel in 2 sides. That's in this point here and what? In this point here. So we're going to multiply this by what? 2. And then we're going to be having what? 8,000, and we're going to be having 8,700. Doing this, we've measured for what? These 2 parallel what? Blockwork here and what? Here. So the next blockwork we're going to be looking at is the blockwork between this what? Dimension line here, passing through this column type 2 down to what? Call out F. And as you can see, we're not giving the total dimension from this point to this point. Instead, we're giving 2 dimensions. 4,033 is the dimension from what's called out E to F, and 560 is the dimension for this smaller part. So what we need is a dimension from this point down to call out F. So we have to add those 2 dimensions together. 4,033 plus 560 is going to give me what? 4,593. So it means that the dimension from here to this point is 4,593. So now we'll now use the same approach. We'll remove half of column type 2, because it's column type 2 we have here and it's column type 2 we have on the other side. So minus half of the length of column type 2 from this point, from this column here, and half of the length of column type 2 from this column here. So when we minus this, whatever we have will be the length of the blockwork from this edge of the column to the other edge of the column. So now this is what the blockwork we are measuring, that I'm highlighting here. And what can you see? This blockwork is parallel to another blockwork, and it is this blockwork under. Because this blockwork under is within the same what? Dimension, the same length as what? The first one up. So if we trace from this dimension line here, you can see that it is passing through what? The same the column for the first blockwork area and the second blockwork area. See, it's passing through. And if you trace call out F, you can see that it is still within that parameter. So whatever we have here will be the same as whatever we have here, because the blockwork are parallel to each other and it is within that what? Call out. I hope that's easily understood. But please, to backtest it, I would say you should use the same approach that I did to calculate for the blockwork individually, so that you see what I'm like saying, because maybe this might be too fast for you. But if you want to actually see that what I'm doing is correct, measure for the length of the blockwork individually, and you will see that the ones that are parallel will be what? Equal. It's just simple geometry. So since we've understood how we're going about this, we'll now what? Do the measurement in the measurement what? Sheet. So this is what? The third one now. So we'll now see the total length was what? 4,593. We'll now less 2 by what? Half of the length of column type 2, which is what? 230, and that will be equal to what? 230. So when you do the math, you're going to be having what? 4,363. So 4,363 now is the length of the what? Blockwork, for one blockwork from this edge towards the other edge. So now what we have here is the same as what we have here. So we'll be multiplying the length by what? 2. So when you multiply it by 2, you're going to be having what? 8,726. So doing this, you've measured for what? That particular what? Blockwork. So now the next blockwork we're going to be looking at will be what? This blockwork within the staircase area, and what? This blockwork here. Now, as you can see, this blockwork within the staircase area is within callout C and callout what? D. So now if I bring this thing here like this and I trace callout C, you will see that callout C is what? Is the starting point of what? This this area of where the blockwork is placed. And if I trace callout D, you can see I'm tracing it, and that is where the midpoint of what the column that contains the blockwork is. And similarly, it is the same thing for what? This point, this blockwork here. Callout C, you can trace it to this point here. It's just that the only difference now is that the blockwork for this point is within two columns, column type 1 and column type 1. However, this point, it is intersecting what? A blockwork vertically. But it doesn't really matter as far as the length or the thickness of the blockwork is the same as the thickness of the what? Column. The thickness of the column here is what? 230 by what? 230. Column type what? 1. And the thickness of our blockwork here, in which this blockwork is intersecting, is what? 230. So it means that the starting point here would still remain the starting point here. I hope that's understandable. So the length of this blockwork from this edge to this edge would also be the length of the blockwork from the edge of this intersection down to the edge of what? This column, because this is column type 2 and column type 2 is the same dimension as what? Column type 1 in the drawing. In the drawing from column type 1 to 4, they were all 230 by what? 230. So now that is why this blockwork here will be parallel towards this blockwork here. So whatever length we find here will be the same length as what? This point here. So the one now we're looking at is what? This blockwork. And it is parallel towards this blockwork here. So this blockwork now that is intersecting the vertical side, we are stopping just at the edge of the what? Intersection. We are not taking it inside. Please take note of that. So now we now need to determine what the length of this block would be. So now we know that it is in between callout C and D, and the dimension from callout C to D is what? 3,943. So that we now need to minus what? The thickness, half of the thickness of column type 1 from what? Both sides, to get the length of the blockwork from this edge to this edge. So now we'll do the maths. We know that the length from callout C to D is what? 3,943. We'll now less what? Half of the what? Column type from both sides. That's column type 1, and the dimension is 230 by 230. So it will be what? 2 by half of what? 230, and that will be equals to what? 230. So when you do the maths, you're going to be having what? 3,713. So now 3,713 is the length of what? One of that blockwork. The length of what? Just this one here. So you know that this one and this one, they are parallel. So 3,713 here is the same as what here. So I'm going to be multiplying it by what? 2. So multiplied by what? 2. And then we're going to be having 7,426. So 7,426 is the what? Length of what? Those two blockwork that we have in the what? Drawing. So we've measured for this one and what? This one. So the next one we're going to be looking at now will be for what? This horizontal blockwork here. And what we're going to be doing now is that we're going to be tracing this horizontal point to the call out. So from this column here, if I trace the midpoint, you can see it is going to what? Call out D here. And similarly, the opposite side, if I trace this call out, you can see it's going to call out what? F. So we need to know what is the dimension from what? Call out D to call out what? F. And to get that, in between that, we have 3 dimensions. This dimension, and what? This dimension. So we have to add everything together to get us the total length from call out D to F. So 637 plus 560 plus 4,033 is equal to what? 5,230. So it means that the dimension from call out D, which is from this point to this point, is what? 4,230. So we'll not do the same what? The same method as we used to calculate it. Like I said before, in the drawing, column type 1 to 4 have the same dimension, 230 by what? 230. And as you can see, this particular one is within a column type 1 and a column type 4. So there's no need to fret because the dimensions will be the same as per in the drawing, 230 by what? 230. So what we now need to do is to minus half of what? The length of column type 1 and half of the length from column type what? 4. So we're now going to be using the same approach for this one. The total length of the dimension from column D to F as we calculated is what? 5,230. So we'll now less what? 2 by half of what? 230, which is what? 230. And when you do the math, you are going to be having what? 5,230. You are going to be having 5,000. Sorry. And when you do the math, you are going to be having what? 5,000. So now we're not multiplying it by 2 because there is no other what? Blockwork that is parallel to that one. So it means that we've measured for what? This blockwork here. I hope that is easily understood. So now we are almost done with what? The horizontals. So the next horizontal blockwork we're going to be looking at is this particular one here. This blockwork here. We didn't call out E and what? Call out F. And as you can see, the dimension from call out E to F is what? 4,033. Meaning that from this point to this point is what? 4,033. So we need to determine the length of this blockwork from this edge to what? This edge. But now what can you see? This blockwork is within column type 6 and column type what? 2. We know that the dimension of column type 2 is what? 230 by what? 230. However, the dimension of column type what? 6 in the drawing is 230 by what? 381. Meaning that this shorter part is 230 and this longer part is what? 381. So now the only place we are going to be having a little of work is what? In the column type 6, because the call out does not actually fall in between the midpoint of what? The longer side of the column. Like if you see closely, you can see that this is the midpoint here, but this edge or this one at the left hand side is shorter than the point on the what? right hand side. So now we have to find a way to deduce what is what the length of this shorter side and what is the length of this what longer side. We are not going to be using the same approach as we did when the blockwork, when the call out was passing symmetrically through the midpoint of what the column type. Now this is what a rectangular what column, and the call out is not passing through the midpoint of what the rectangular column. So now we need to determine what is what the length of the shorter side and what is the length of the what longer side. I hope that makes sense. So now how do we find that? Now to find that, you can see that the starting point of this column here is at the edge of what this blockwork, meaning that if this starting point of this column is at the edge of this blockwork, we can see that from this edge down to this point will be the length of what this blockwork. So since we know that from here to here is the thickness of the blockwork, we can now determine what is from here to here. So we can now do that by saying, since we know that the length is, or that column is 381, we will now minus what the thickness of that blockwork, which is what 230, which is what 230, and that will be what 151, meaning that the length from this edge down to the edge of the what column is what 151. So since we have this edge, we can now what add half of the what thickness of this blockwork, which is 230 divided by 2, which is 115. So it means that from here to here, that's from the edge of the wall down to the midpoint of call out what E is what 115. Meanwhile, from the edge of the wall down to the other edge of the what column is what 151. So when you add that two together, you're going to be having the dimension from this midpoint down to the edge of the what column. I hope that makes sense. So 151 plus 115 is equal to what 266, meaning that at this edge we are going to be minusing 266 from the what dimension for this side, and then we're going to be minusing half of the length of column type 2 from this side. So now we're not going to be doing the maths. So the length is what 4033. So we'll now minus the first side of what column type 6, and the part we're removing is what as much as what 266 as we calculated. Then we'll now less what the other half, which is what 115. So now when you do the math, here is what 266 and here is what 115. So 4033 minus what 266 minus 115 is equal to what 3652. So here will be what 3652. So we've gotten the dimension for what this blockwork here. And I hope that makes sense. So we have two horizontal blockwork left, which is this point here and what this point here. Now you might be looking at these blockworks and you might be thinking that they are parallel, but they are not. Why? Because here we have column type 1, and the dimension of column type 1 is 230 by what 230, and here we have what column type 6, and the dimension is what 230 by 381. Meanwhile, in this other blockwork, here is column type 5, and the dimension is 300 by 300, and here is column type 5, and the dimension is what 300 by what 300. So because of the difference in their column types, the length of the blockworks now will be what different. So we're going to be measuring them individually. So starting with what, let me use the uniform one, starting with what this one here. So this particular block work is between call out C to call out what? E. So we need to determine the dimension from call out C to E, and there are 3 given dimensions within that call out. So we have to add this, and this together to what? Get the what? Total length. So 3,943 plus 637 plus what? 560 is equal to what? 5,140. So it means that the dimension from call out C to call out E is 5,140. So we have to minus half of what? The length of column type 5 from this edge, and half of the length of column type 5 from this edge. So with that, we can now do the math. So it should now become what? The total length is what? 5,140. So we'll now less what? 2 by half of what? The length of column type 5, which is what? 300. So when you do the math, it's going to give you what? 300. Meaning that we'll be lessing 115 from the other edge and 115 from the other edge, which is giving us 300. So when you minus this, you are going to be having what? 4,840. So this is the what? Dimension for what? This particular what? Block work. So let me just mark it. So the last horizontal block work now, which is left, is what? This particular one, and this particular one is still within call out C towards E, and we've already determined the dimension from call out C to E as what? 5,140. So now what are we now going to be doing? We are going to be minusing half of what? The length of column type 1, and you know that the length of column type 1 is 230, so half will be what? 115. So we'll minus 115 from here. Now at this point here, what are we going to be minusing from this point? We know that the length of column type 6 is what? 381. So this column type 6 is 230 by what? 381. And we determine the length of this column type from the midpoint, that's from this call out E here as this line pass down to the edge, to be what? 266 when we're measuring for what? This block work here. So since we know that from this point down to this edge is 266, we can now minus that from the length of what? The column type. It will give us what? The remainder, which is from this point to this point. So 381 minus 266 is equal to what? Is equal to what? 115. So it means that from this point to this point is going to be half of the thickness of what? The block work. So we can now still use the same approach as we did before, where since what we are minusing here will be the same thing as what we are minusing here, so we can now say, since we know this, the length from call out C to E as 5,140, we will now less what? 2 by half of what? 230, and that will be equals to what? 230. So when you do the maths, 5,140 minus 230 is equal to what? 4,910. So this will be the length of what? This particular what? Block work here. 4,910. So with this, we've measured for what? All the horizontal what? Block work in this drawing. So what we're now going to be doing now is we're going to be adding everything together to get the total length of what all the horizontal block work before we move to the vertical block work. So when you add everything together, the total horizontal block work is going to be what? A length of 62,154 meters. 62,144 millimeters. So now after this, now we're not going to begin measuring for what? The vertical block work.